In this podcast, I'd like to take a look at two subjects that I've been calling natural spirituality and supernatural spirituality, and compare them and contrast them. By natural spirituality, I'm talking about that which exists in every person, even atheists, has nothing to do with any specific concept of God or religion, but does frequently express itself in religion. But it is that which is common naturally to all human beings and causes all human beings to seek explanation for the bigger questions of life. Where did we come from? Why are we here? Where are we going? What is the meaning of life? What is the purpose of my life? What is the meaning of my life? And how do I decide what is good and what is bad? What is of value and what is not? What is of greater value and what is of lesser value? So this kind of spirituality, we could say, has to do with meaning, it has to do with values, and it has to do with purpose. Now, it is true that many people, perhaps even the vast majority of people in all cultures and all histories, add a fourth dimension to this, and that is the quest for transcendence, for some connection with the higher power that inhabits the universe, was here before we got here, and will be here after we leave. But we're going to deal with that later under the heading of supernatural spirituality. What I want to notice for right now is that natural spirituality is something that, so far as we can tell, is characteristic of all human beings at all times and in all places. Another aspect of natural spirituality is the way in which it accounts for many of these so-called mysterious mind-body effects. There are ways in which the mind influences the body, ways that we have trouble explaining, ways that include, for example, placebo effects, and ways that things like stress influence the immune system and therefore influence health. These natural ways that are common to all human beings constitute a large part of the healing properties of medicine, or the healing abilities of medicine. For centuries and centuries and centuries, healers had nothing else but natural spirituality. They didn't have surgery that worked. They didn't have pharmacy that worked. All they had was the patient's belief that the healer was able to help them to feel better, and a few very simple and not always terribly effective natural remedies. But believing that the healer brought help, believing that the healer's remedies were efficacious, exerted a positive influence on the patient, and more often than not, healing came along as a result of this mind-body effect. Physicians capitalized on this for centuries. This is a large part of the art of medicine, the ability to listen to people and to help them to believe that the physician understands and cares and knows how to address the person's malady. This is the old statement often attributed to physician Dr. William Osler that goes back really to the ancient Greek physician Hippocrates, that says more important than understanding the disease that the patient has is understanding the patient who has the disease. This is the way in which these mind-body effects, these placebo effects, this natural spirituality is enhanced and utilized to facilitate healing in any particular patient. And once again, this is tremendously powerful to help people to get into a healing frame of mind, to help people to utilize their natural abilities to allow the body to heal itself, to reduce anxiety and fear, to instill hope and confidence and peacefulness. These are tremendous healing powers, and just because they're ancient and natural doesn't mean that we want to diminish them in any way. So this natural spirituality really needs to be understood by physicians and nurses and anybody else who wants to help see people get well. It is a tremendously powerful medicine for human beings. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about supernatural spirituality. What I mean by supernatural spirituality is a spirituality that includes all the aspects of natural spirituality, meaning search for meaning, as well as quest for values and a desire to understand purpose. But it adds to it one more element, and that is the search for transcendence. And I mean by that the ability to move outside of ourselves as human beings and to believe that there is a higher power in the universe and that that higher power is accessible to us in some way. In other words, to look around the universe, unlike other animals do, and to say, where did all this come from? How does it work? Why does it work the way it works? What's the explanation for all of this? Is there something outside of the natural, observable, empirically testable world that is an ultimate reality, a ground of being? Did it all come from someplace? Is there a creator behind all of this? Is there an intelligence that makes it all work? Is there a reason why things are arranged the way they are? And is it possible for us to connect somehow with that? Part of this is the recognition that even when the questions of meaning and value and purpose are answered, there's still this hunger inside the human soul for something more. St. Augustine said, "To God, you have made us for yourself, and our hearts find no rest until they find their rest in you." Or another way of putting it is to talk about that God-shaped hole that is a part of every human being, and that every human being seeks to fill in some way. You could say, well, that's natural spirituality again, and yes, it is in a sense, but it goes beyond that. It's more than that. This is the higher power that Alcoholics Anonymous talks about, that addicts really need to reach out to and connect with in order to find the strength to take it day by day and to get through and not drink. So when we're talking about supernatural spirituality, we're recognizing a couple of very important factors. One factor is that naturalism doesn't answer all the questions. In other words, that naturalism is really a kind of religion. And you could, if you wanted, you could even equate it with the religion of scientism. The idea that science can answer all the questions, that science explains everything that is worth knowing. Now, science is a very good thing, and science as a way of studying the natural world and answering questions about how do things work is a great endeavor that has given us untold benefits. But when one makes the transition from science to scientism, one has moved from science to religion. Scientism is not scientific. That is to say, scientism accepts a priori various assumptions about the way the world is that are not provable. Therefore, they are not testable. They are not falsifiable. Therefore, they are not scientific. They are no more scientific than any religion is scientific. Scientism says naturalism is all there is, and by definition, anything that can't be explained by naturalism is not valid. Well, that is an a priori, an assumption that is unprovable. Certainly it's untestable. So when we talk about supernatural spirituality, we're recognizing a kind of spirituality that believes in nature and wants to investigate nature, but it doesn't believe that naturalism is all there is. In other words, it doesn't see the universe as necessarily excluding supernaturalism. Another aspect of supernatural spirituality is its recognition that human beings not only find meaning, value, and purpose in logic and reason and explanation, but they also find meaning and value and purpose in being connected in a sense that you might call a mystical connection with other people and other things outside of themselves. So mysticism, in a sense, becomes a very important part of supernatural spirituality. And what mysticism attempts to do is to say, not everything that is real is empirically verifiable. And not only that, but there is a mysterious and essentially unexplainable kind of connection between people and between things in the universe that comes close to what Carl Jung, the great psychoanalyst, meant when he talked about collective consciousness, or what the Eastern religions mean when they talk about consciousness. Now, I don't mean that this is not a specifically biblical and Christian category. I mean simply that it recognizes that we share in humanity. We all belong to each other in the sense in which we all belong to God. And in a very real sense, the mind of God is something that we don't know logically, but we can, in a sense, connect with spiritually. Another aspect of this supernatural spirituality may be understood by looking at a, a human being who has gone as far as natural spirituality can take him. He has found meaning and value and purpose, and he's gone as far as that natural spirituality can take him to be a whole and complete human being who's able to cope with adversity. And now we add an additional dimension to this, that this person is able to connect with a higher power, with a source of wisdom and strength and goodness outside of himself or herself that produces an added benefit to every benefit that he has received through natural spirituality. In other words, that there is really and truly something additional that comes into the life of a person who believes in God and who connects with God and who experiences the presence and the power and the wisdom and the grace and the forgiveness and the mercy and the love of God in his or her own life. That this God connection is a real thing and that it does good to people. In other words, that it really is positive in terms of helping them to experience health and wholeness. So you might think of this as faith, that a person who is going through, let's say, a terminal illness, who is facing death, and who has benefited all that he can from being a healthy human being, but also has this connection with God that sustains him or her through this terminal illness. Even though they walk through the valley of the shadow of death, they fear no evil, for they know that God is with them. And that is a kind of additional benefit that supernatural spirituality gives that natural spirituality does not give. So if you can imagine an atheist who has all the natural spirituality going for him, alongside or in the next bed to a patient who has all of that plus a supernatural spirituality, a confidence that there is a God who loves him and cares for him and knows him and is at work in his life, then you kind of get a sense of what the difference is as we contrast natural spirituality and supernatural spirituality. So what I'm suggesting here is that every patient needs natural spirituality, a sense of meaning, a sense of value, a sense of purpose. Every patient needs to have his or her life enhanced by the fullness of their humanity, by having a sense of meaning, by being able to cope with adversity, by being able to find meaning even in difficulties, having a clear understanding of his or her values, what they would live for, what they would die for, what they would take a bullet for, of having a sense of why they're here and where they're going and what life is about. But also adding to that another aspect, and that is that supernatural spirituality, which includes this sense of transcendence that enables the person to reach outside of himself or herself and connect with the power of God, that enables that person to face life with more power and more wisdom and more grace and more love than he or she could ever muster up within themselves. And that's the element that we're talking about as we talk about the difference between natural spirituality and supernatural spirituality. So we're not talking here about people either having spirituality or not having spirituality. We're working on the assumption that everybody has a kind of spirituality. This is the way in which the mind influences the body. But what we're talking about is not only do we want to maximize that, we also want to add to it, if the patient is willing, a supernatural ingredient that enables that person to have even more than natural spirituality can possibly provide. So you might picture it kind of like this, that we are talking here about a kind of three-legged stool. And as you well know, stools don't stand up very well without at least three legs. One of these legs is called science, and certainly that is a tremendously important part of medicine. Another leg is called natural spirituality, and this is the place where mind-body effects come to play without regard for whether or not the person has a vision of God or practices religion. This is the place where a healthy human being with a sense of meaning and value and purpose, a person who has achieved a healthy internal environment conducive to healing, is able to utilize the benefits that scientific medicine confers in order to get well. And then this third leg is a supernatural kind of medicine or spirituality or healing, if you will, that goes beyond these other two and adds a connection with God that, in a sense, supernaturally empowers the person to experience a healing force that goes beyond anything that is explainable by empirical evidence, meaning science, evidence-based medicine. When these three things come together, then we have a genuine kind of health, a holistic kind of health, a wholeness, a healthiness, a completeness that enables this person to be in every way what he or she was created to be in all of their potential as a human being, and to become what every human being really wants to become, everything that we are capable of becoming. And it takes, I think, this mixture of scientific medicine, mind-body effects through natural spirituality, and this transcendent higher power to fully realize this potential of holistic, complete health.